I'm supposed to be recording. Greetings, everybody. Kathy and I are sitting here having popcorn, going to the movies.
Watching the world end.
Yeah, want the energy. But lots to talk about. We probably won't get to it all, because there always is. But at least for another hour, we're talking about some things. I'm going to share them to my other locations. What? Maybe not. Maybe I shouldn't ask.
It's just some juvenile stuff on
Uh,
Facebook. So I'm in this group called Google Earth Structures and well, I can't say that word. An
Anonymous?
Anoma an
Anomaly?
yeah.
Hmm.
And the post says there appears to be a shipwreck on the north side of St. Matthew Island, Alaska. I can't find any information on this. Do any of you know about it? And the first comment, the person says, seamen die every day, but do you hear about that? And then somebody responded to that comment and said, "Your
Oh, don't tell me.
it's just stupid. It's not that bad."
Uh,
The reply is, "Your mom is the largest cause of seamen's death." It's not that funny, but
oh,
it's
brother.
like juvenile. Like
Yeah, it's bad.
it's a stupid juvenile joke. Hmm.
Yep. And here I'm going to be talking about a few things, including genetic engineering, my vast knowledge of genetic engineering. No, we're exploring, trying to learn more about cloning. I am, and Kathy and I were talking about it. Um, how they actually do it. Do they take an existing egg from one being and basically just birthing a twin from that
Well, we
individual?
don't know.
Right, we don't know. Do it all in a petri dish?
I'm sure we could Google it, but we didn't feel like it.
Yeah, we'll look into it and
Or
it,
not. I don't care.
it reveal right reveal some interesting thoughts though, um, related to a bunch of things that I've read and experienced over the years, and of course related to things that T and Do were teaching, and that they were talking about what the space aliens were doing with their abductions of humans and taking the eggs of the females and sperm from the males, or taking other sperm from males and implanting it into the females, or doing so in test tubes. And now we know that humans are doing those kind of things. I mean, we know that there's a clonade business that Rael has in France, if it's still in France, in Brussels maybe. And then we know about the way that there was a Vietnamese lab that um, uh, made a human clone, whatever that looks like. And I heard there was a complication with that sheep. What was the name of the sheep again?
Dolly.
Dolly. Something about it. It wasn't living very long or something. I don't know what it was. But
I suppose they could just make it again.
Right, if they figured out how to make it the first time, but who knows, whether they had an experiment that went awry and they ended up being a clone. A lot of times by mistakes, they get things. But that's why they do so much trial and error. That's why they want to use humans as guinea pigs.
There's lots of us.
Yeah, there's lots of us. And,
Have you done your sharing?
and that's the mind of the lower forces in progress, seen through many humans. Yeah. Yeah, I have. I shared it, I think. So, but we also wanted to talk about the tapes that we listened to today. Listened to two. They were um, two tapes, and there's that. Yeah, I really didn't want to have that screen so big with my document in it. No, I guess that's all right. So I like to try to post something about the tapes. Yeah, this is my rough notes, by the way. And so, yeah, I put the title as, um, getting related to Epstein. And I called it Epstein and a cloning operation like Space Alien Abductions to get human DNA, question mark. I'm not saying that this is all factual. I'm just saying that uh, I guess I might as well dig into that before I get to the tapes. But I've been wondering for a while, and it was just like last week that I know Kathy, she stays close to the news more than I do a lot of times. From considered to be more mainstream sources. So I guess what's the name of that one paper that you follow all the time?
Daily Mail.
Daily Mail. Yeah, that's out of Great Britain, right? Out of England.
I think, yeah.
And a lot of times they'll publish things that I think you won't see probably in the American press. But and so um, which is good because we need variety. But anyway, Kathy was telling me some days ago. She mentioned that there was some evidence, or somebody was talking in the Blair Witch.
No, there there was a survivor.
It's the Blair Witch. Sorry, Blair
Um,
White.
Blair White is the person that was interviewing the survivor from Jeffrey Epstein, and she was talking about it.
She mentioned cloning. That and mentioned that it seemed like at some point, whether she was awake or dreaming or drugged, she woke up and there were some like doctors, like people in white coats, standing around her, and and that there were times where those people in white coats were like in a floor above them, observing her or others that were um, in the company of one of the Epstein facilities, and so it was multi-leveled. And so when I didn't at first when she brought that up like a week ago, it didn't like really register much. But then today I was going through shorts and stuff, and there's so much going on with like the Facebook Reels to where people are posting all these things
On
on.
your page, I don't see any of that stuff on mine.
Well, because I gravitate to the
Right.
conspiracies.
So it's not like there's something
Right, right. It's
going
not
on.
right. It's not necessarily
I haven't seen one reel on my Facebook
right,
since
right.
I've been on it.
But because of my strange relationship with Facebook,
Yes.
and what I post and stuff, I get, things that, are depicting a fake moon landing
Yeah, you get all kinds of
and,
stuff. You get a lot of
lots of
nine
different
eleven
things.
stuff. I don't get any of
Nine
that.
eleven stuff galore I get because I've shared some of it. Anyway, so, but because of that, I noticed today I felt like I was getting a lot more than usual. And I don't know if that was, um, well, I did just recently post some things, so that's probably why. I mean, it's not like it's magic or there's some, we know that the search engines and the bots that regulate what people are getting are all based on previous, things that we do. Okay, so that's all that is. But the fact that I noticed it and I was noticing new things showing up that were saying new things about a bunch of different subjects that I hadn't heard before, and some of them were, I think, interesting, and other ones not so interesting. But it just like what it did to me was because today after I was done with all that, I turned on the TV, and when Kathy came home, we I had left the TV on with a Russell Brand post on there, and and I think he was mostly talking about geoengineering subject, which I get all kinds of things about as well. And and I hadn't watched it yet, and I don't believe everything Russell Brand says, and I don't follow all of his posts, and I comment on some of them, and I like some of the things. Many of the things that he talks about, I think, are good to talk about, and reveals a lot of truth things that are true that I really respect that he's been providing those things, regardless of his rock star kind of personality. I mean, I don't, I mean, I know he has got a lot of popularity over the years. Anyway, but so um, so when I heard him talking about how more or less it's getting to a point where you cannot know what to believe. Everything can be twisted, and everything can be false reporting, and everything could be exaggerated, and everything could be like focusing on one little thing, or this little thing, or this little inconsistency, or that, and basically think that. And making that into a fact, and people talking with authority as if this is a fact, that this didn't happen or this did happen, and blah blah blah. And of course I've been thinking about this for years, and I've been talking about it for years, and T&O talked about it in different ways over the years and wrote about it, and it's all very evident that it's happening, and it is definitely happening in an accelerated way, because since they left, I would say is the biggest turning point in my mind. Even though there were things going on before that as well, I know very well about because I've studied a lot of history in that regard. But like with the stimulation for the Vietnam War and the escalation of it for the bombing campaign in Cambodia and Laos, and on and on and on, back to World War II, of course, and even before that, you can find all kinds of things that were being written down, but then these kind of things aren't really written down in history books, and not even necessarily put into Wikipedia pages that clearly sometimes, although a lot of the things are in those pages. But the point I'm getting at, I want to make, is that um, I had the thought that when the last time we talked a little bit about Epstein, tiny, tiny, tiny bit, and that I think it was during a live stream, and I had the thought come to me that uh, something about that and the space aliens, the UFO subject, and I didn't at the time I thought of it as like maybe part of the cover up and having to do with like the building of underground bases. At the time, that's what I was thinking, that maybe Epstein's locations were underground bases, or maybe they were uh, a stopover point that some could come to if they wanted to get information about underground bases and how things were proceeding. And then just today, when Kathy and I were talking about these things, just like it dawned on me, and I'm not saying that it's true, but it dawned on me that the talk about one of the victims in the Epstein story having experience with people with white coats standing around her, and to where she thought maybe they were taking eggs from her, even though she didn't have a conscious recollection of it. I mean, wow, wow, what a huge story. Because that's exactly what the space aliens wanted to do with humans. One of the main things they do is create hybrids. And wouldn't you think that humans want to do that too? Because of that space alien influence and their quest for being able to do it? To play what people that believe in God would say playing God. Well, they do play God. They decide who lives and who dies all over the planet, all the time. And they experiment with medications using people as the guinea pigs. They're doing it all the time. And do they fix the things that are problems? Yes, they try to a lot of times, but they don't necessarily talk about those problems, and they don't take the things off the market hardly at all, unless they get so much backlash from so many people that they do, which has happened over the years. Going England had things they took off the market and so forth. There's lots of examples. Okay, but and the cloning we know is happening, and the reason why they're doing it in other countries or doing it in ways that nobody's reporting on it hardly is because they know it's a controversial subject, and most of the populace uh, like would be terrified by it, and another part of the populace thinks it's perfectly natural to do, and it's a way to it's that quest for eternal life, which is the backsided way of looking at the fact that the next level was saying that they were the only place that could give somebody eternal life, and that was made into the religion, of course, and and so the lower forces stimulated all the ideas to shoot that down, and they made it so that the ones that were considered to be the believers in that information about the next level were crazy, and because of the way they were acting, and they weren't abiding by the lessons that were given, like that Jesus gave, and yet they were claiming to be disciples of Jesus, and they were going to get the benefit of going to heaven with Jesus because they happened to believe, as if Jesus would want them there. And they have that all is construed in the religions, or construed that if you have a belief and you live a good life to a certain degree, and that when you die you go to heaven. And it's interesting that though I was talking about this in the tape a little tiny bit, and how it's true. If the next level determines that you've lived a good life according to what their criteria is, then when you die, you will be saved in a capacity to go to be stored on ice. Though we talk about it that way. Uh, so you'd be in the company of heaven, and of the kingdom of heaven, really, not the company of heaven, because the word heaven technically means the elevated areas above the earth, and also the abode of God, because the members of the next level live and reside on spacecrafts or among planets or on spacecrafts that can't even be planets. Or maybe they're not spacecrafts, but they're traveling in an orbit of some sort. So, but that doesn't mean that they're a spacecraft in other ways that we think about spacecrafts. I know people have talked about Gaia, the Earth. That's the Greek word for the Earth, and as a spacecraft. I think somebody wrote a book about it, a spacecraft Earth or something like that. I don't remember. I don't think I read it, but I know there's been talk of that. But and it's because it's got truth to it, and and yet also what's got truth to it is the fact that the disinformation campaign and the dilution campaign and the distortion campaign uh, put upon humans has made it so that at this point, for anybody coming into life and observing what's being talked about on the media and on YouTube, uh, uh, many people settle into limiting themselves in what they're going to believe, and that's rightfully so, I think, because you can't believe everything you're told, of course, and haven't we seen so much evidence of that? And yet, are we going to know the absolute truth about every subject? And no, we're not. I don't think. I don't think we can know the absolute about anything, and we can't even necessarily know the absolute about the next level unless we continue to reach for their mind. And that's kind of I think, the way it works for any subject. That you could probably research it and research it and research it, and you could probably shoot down all the misinformation by research alone if it was reported accurately. Of course, it's not always reported accurately, but it seems like after the fact, a lot of times, things do get reported in pieces. So if you read all the books about JFK assassination or Martin Luther King or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or assassinations, that the more you read, the more you get. And the more you listen to the alternative media from whatever the mainstream is at the time, the more potential you get for the truth and also misinformation, okay, or disinformation, to where something's being, they're actually on purpose trying to sow seeds of deceit and manipulation into the information they're providing. And where misinformation can be, like, in my mind, this is the way I define it, like more of a misunderstanding of it's a little off the mark. And it's maybe similar to the truth, but it's missing it. It's missing the bigger parts of it, or many key elements to it. I don't know. That's just the way I feel about it right now, and I'm open to changing those definitions, but I have to be open to changing. Uh, I mean, even I have to even be open to changing what the way that I interpret what Tiendo said, and I can't allow myself to trust in myself that I have the right interpretation. And Doe was talking about this in the tapes, that he doesn't trust himself, uh, um, and uh, and that you as the students shouldn't trust yourselves, because. But he wasn't saying that he wasn't trustworthy. What he was saying was that he knows that he can trust his older member, T. So, um, so his objective is to share what the mind from T that he received and took on to himself, and even received with T at the same time T was receiving it while they were working together for all those years. And but apply it, look how to apply it in the current circumstances, because he knew that in certain circumstances, uh, you wouldn't have the same application necessarily of what the application was 20 years ago, or whatever years ago, or whatever time ago, where he experienced something with tea. And he talks about that in the tape a little bit too, that that he sometimes feels like tea was um, uh, thinking that he was putting too much effort, too much time and effort to trying to get the exact right title to use if they went public again. And that it's more important. He's always juggling between being accurate, to the information and what crowd, what form of thinking to put it in, so that he can give the people the biggest chance of seeing the truth in it, and and as opposed, not opposed to, but in addition to the other side of looking at it, that of getting it done quickly, because it's always the way that members of the next level act, is to try to get their tasks done quickly without sacrificing the task. So it's a two-sided. It's not a two-sided coin, but it's got multiple facets to it. It's not just like we talked about in the last stream. There were many things Doe said about the exit and the recycling and who would be saved from it. So for anybody to take just one part of it is fine, for themselves personally. But if they're going to tell other people about it, then I think if they really want to do a decent job, then they would include other things that Doe said that were equally applicable to different individuals who have different experiences and different um, capacity to absorb the information. And that uh, another thing in these tapes regarding the talk that Dan Sodi had over the phone with Whitley Strieber, was that um, if that you don't want to lie to somebody, but you also don't want to say things to them that are very likely to really trip them up, become a stumbling block for them to hear what else you have to say. So, and there's lots of examples of this. And the fact that Doe was talking about this in these last number of in the last number of tapes in the 260s and 70s now, um, because he was considering, he felt like it was instruction to make another public presentation, and he had to figure out how and when and where and why. Not why so much, but because it was instruction he felt from T. And so he had to answer those questions for himself, and he wanted to be the check partner of the students to doing that, because he felt like it was the task of the students to do it, to bring the information public again if they were going to do it. And at that moment in 1987 and 8, he was still thinking about doing it. And 88 and 89 and 90 and 91, 92, 93, 94, 5, 6, and 7. The whole time that he was here, after T left, almost the whole time, he was thinking about that it was right to proceed to think about sharing their information with other people. And so he was constantly thinking, well, I can't talk to if I talk to the UFO people, that believe in the UFO phenomena and all that entails, but I use religious terms, I'm going to lose a bunch of them, because a lot of them are going to think, oh gosh, this is a church, it's a religion. That's like, I don't want to be seen by others as believing in religion, because it's obsolete, whatever the reasons are. a lot of people that go into the UFO stories uh, really don't feel consistent with any kind of one, you know, religious teaching. Some do, of course, but overall, uh, I mean, we sent the '88 update that Doe wrote to Walt Andrews of the who is the founder of MUFON, living in Seguin, Texas, and we sent him. Uh, um, I didn't physically send it to him, but I know there was a list made that uh, Doe made available. I think I looked over the list, and but I didn't know some of the people that he was sending stuff to. But we talked about some of them. But I know that it was mailed out. Uh, I don't have any reason to doubt that it was mailed out to a number of people. But Walt Andrews' response, from what best I understand, was that this I'm not interested in this. In some way. I don't know if he said more than that, but because I wasn't assigned to making the phone call if they made a phone call to him or not, like they did with Whitley Strieber. But I don't know if he got an '88 update or not. But in any case, Doe was working on how to talk to people again, and he knew that he couldn't talk to a lot of the religious um, that much, although he tried by getting educated and then watching what the Christians primarily were talking about, which we had satellite dishes even when we were living outdoors in Arizona and in New Mexico. We were putting up these big, like 7 or 8 foot diameter um, satellite dishes that were made out of metal and cast iron and stuff. And we would carry them around. We'd take them apart, all the nuts and bolts. We'd take them apart and put them back together again. And Lagodi he had the task of constructing stands so that they could easily be erected instead of having to sink them into concrete on the land, because we weren't always living on the land, and we didn't own the land where we were having when we had houses. We had satellite dishes when we had houses too. When we had warehouses that we were living in with our trailers, we put them on the roof with the stands that were made for them. And so we always had access to, we had the AP, Associated Press feeds that were coming across like a ticker tape on this one channel. And then we had access to Kenneth Copeland uh, uh, Tammy Faye Baker, and the Bakers, and the Trinity Broadcasting, and all these different, probably dozens of popular Christian evangelicals. And it's not that Doe was uh, that interested in what they were saying, except for how they were still saying the truth. And at one time he said that they're saying the right things, but not all the time, of course. But but they don't know that there's more. There's a lot more actually, and they're a lot of times blocked from hearing more because of their whatever program they accepted, that this was the only body of information that was going to reveal to them everything they needed to know about the second coming. And it wasn't all they needed to know about the second coming, because people weren't going to recognize how, now that the civilization has become technically advanced to know about space travel, even, or space. Even if you want to look at space travel as being in airplanes, because that's the elevated areas above the Earth, that in those days, 2,000 years ago, the only things they saw flying around there were birds and stuff. But in the far heavens, they knew that there were these lights, and they knew that the sun was out there somewhere and providing all the light, and it was on a cycle, and it was happening every day about the same time. So it was telling you that there was some kind of a cycle here. Maybe we are round. But so then now you got all these, you know, alternative ideas coming out and being pushed into the mainstream more and more, uh, trying to discount all things. Well, I don't say all things 'cause that's too absolute, but uh, many things that many of us believed all along without any proof. Like I believed that the moon landings, or at least one of them, or some of them, happened, and yet just today I thought to myself, okay, because I asked T and O in my mind to help me understand if that didn't happen, and and so I saw some shorts today that were saying reasons why they thought it didn't happen, and when I looked at those reasons, I thought, wait a minute, this doesn't really add up to me as reasons. But I want to know if it didn't really happen, and I had all kinds of ideas about how both is probably true. But anyway, I'm not going to go into all that because there were simulations done, you know, but other things about that. But um, the point is that there's several points I've been trying to reach at, and that there's the only way we're gonna find out if something is true is if we start looking to T and O's information because they're the only ones that are trustworthy.
Where's the chat?
Nothing to see here. We popped out. Oh, it's right here. Let me go to the chat. Oh yeah, midnight cooking is here on this
Is it
topic.
all comments, live chat?
Oh no. Yeah, that might have added another one. So Midnight Cooking says on this topic, there's an article where they interview the landlord of the mansion, and he claims that Doe once offered to trade him a computer in exchange for a child, which doesn't sound like Doe to me. That sounds stupid.
That's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous. See, that's what I'm talking about. It's growing.
I'd wonder where I'd like to see an article that was stating that.
You know, we've
That
got
person, that landlord has said things, but never that.
no.
That doesn't even sound like what the landlord would say of the Rancho Santa Fe mansion.
Claims that Doe once offered to trade him a computer in exchange for a child.
There weren't even kids in the group.
That's so
That
stupid.
doesn't even make sense.
Children weren't allowed to be in the group.
That almost sounds like something
Doe
somebody
didn't.
would say.
One time, Doe called children. He called them urchins. Does that sound like somebody that would want to have a child around them? Because children, the reason why they weren't into children was because not that there's anything wrong with children, was that they weren't mature enough to make a choice of leaving everything behind in order to become a member of the next level. They can barely understand that kind of thing. And that's why it shows that all these religious groups that are brainwashing children because they're just there, the parents bring them into the environment to where they then are offered the brainwashing of thinking that's the thing to believe in. And a lot of them probably reject it and they probably become homeless people, whatever. Yeah, so there's no truth to that. And I could talk for hours about it. Yeah, right. Well, you said that it doesn't sound like dough to me. And you're right, it doesn't sound like dough to you. It's good to learn what dough sounds like in order to discount those kind of things. Yeah.
He actually isn't on record as saying much.
So Vivian Davis says, Happy Wednesday, Sawyer and Kathy. Happy Wednesday to you. It's still Wednesday, right? Yeah, I'm losing track. I was off today, so I didn't have to pay attention. Kathy went out and beat the bushes.
I didn't pay much attention.
It's day of the week, I know. Yeah, I did so well. I did pretty decent on Tuesday. So I wonder why it didn't work. Oh boy. Oh boy. That looks good. A toasted bagel. And we only have a little bit of butter left. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. So, yeah. So Sunshine says, "Hi guys. I had a nightmare as a child that has stuck with me for years with men in white coats. I tried to describe it and I wasn't able to send it. You weren't able to send it? Yeah. Yeah, it might have been too many words, but if you want to if you want to send us something to look at, you can send something to our email at sawcat575 at gmail.com. And I'd like to hear what your experience was with that. And then actor Michael Merchant says, "Hey Sawyer and Kathy, hope you are well." And we are, and still kicking over here. And all kinds of new things in my mind were occurring to me today, and thankful for it because I was struggling with feeling like I, you know, didn't have anything to offer. But yeah, I mean, I have tons to offer because we have T and D's information. We always have tons to offer. But but influences, would try to just have me being a downer about it. So it's just part of my package that I go through. I'm glad I go through it because the last thing I need to be is satisfied with where we're at, because that's the way of a member of the next level. I'm not talking about being satisfied with life circumstances, even though that can be part of it too. We can be so satisfied that we don't have a desire to look at anything that might upset the apple cart. You know, uh, but being willing to upset the apple cart is a good thing because the apple cart can always, I don't know where that expression comes from,
Where you go?
but I mean, it can be, it's just a good thing to change, not just for the sake of change. I mean, not even for the sake of change, but because there's always more to learn. There's, there's always more to learn. And I'm not talking about, facts of the world and stuff like that, but about,
Or even facts about the group.
yeah, facts about the group. There's lots to learn from facts about the group. But when you learn more about the facts about the group, then yes, it's a worthy cause. But you can start to think the way they thought in certain ways, and not that you're going to be confident about everything your interpretation of it, because that's a detriment. But you can be confident enough to recognize whether you believe it or not, whether whether you think that they are giving you the highest truth, the highest picture of reality that there is to get. And I haven't heard anybody in the human kingdom, and I've been following things as much as possible for a long time. I haven't had anybody even hold a candle to TNO. They have little pieces, or throughout a lot of things, and I recognize that, and so it's great to see those little pieces. But in those same bodies of information that contain those little pieces, there's all kinds of distortions and dilutions potentially. Whether you can see that way or not depends on how much experience you have with the information and their minds, because it's not just information, it's mind, and mind is living, it's existing. I mean, even the mind in the human kingdom exists outside the vehicle. It's in thought forms, it's in discarnates, deceased humans that are their little spirit module, if you want to call it a spirit module, is floating around, us, and is seeking to attach to people and have experience using human vehicles for the things that they can't experience anymore. Not so interested. Well, you want to get rid of it, huh? Just leave it on your plate. I'll eat it later because I'll probably have something with banana. We got to keep up with using our bananas before they get too ripe.
Fridge.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of room in the fridge right now. So, yeah, so we'll continue to use them, and they're a good source of a lot of stuff, and they got some sweetness to them, So bananas are a good staple, in my opinion, our opinion. Well, okay, so good to hear from actor Michael Merchant. And are those like the thetans in Dianetics? You
Lower
know what?
forces.
Yes, I guess that's what they're like. I don't remember exactly how they define the thetans.
Well, I think they're like specifically from Venus, so that would be a difference.
They're from Venus.
I could be really wrong about that, but I think it's
So that's what Kathy's saying, and she's studied those kind of things a little more than I have. I haven't really studied them. I know that there are. I know you can talk about like in Islam. I forgot what they call
well,
them.
Dianetics is
Yeah, I know. But I'm talking about like other religions where they talk about demons and but they have different terminology they use in Islam for the invisible demons. I forgot what the word was that I remember them hearing saying, and then you have people in the paranormal that talk about them as spirits, or discarnates, or the deceased, or but yeah, it's the same kind of thing, I believe. No, they're not. All the dead people aren't demons, uh, unless they're trying to keep people away from uh, the truth, and then they're not even consciously demons.
as far as my understanding of it.
No, I agree.
So
That's what they are.
if that's what demons are, average Joe Schmo dies, becomes a becomes just
Right,
somebody that is not in their body, who's
right.
not like a demon.
No, because
They
they
the
never
next
knew the
level.
truth.
So
So,
they're
like
they're
Jesus said, forgive them for they know not of what they say.
humans on this planet who are all discarnates, and none of them are demons because they were never members of the next level.
I think that's safe to say. Yeah.
Just trying to be clear.
Yeah, no, it's good to qualify that because,
People thinking that that don't make you become a demon,
right, right.
that you
No,
were a member of the next level and that you were aware of that and got kicked out.
and you went against them
Right.
because you're not a demon if you were a member of the next level and you happen to be back here doing a task and in a vehicle and you even connect with T and Do and then your vehicle dies, even if you
And then you get
uh,
off track or something.
even if you got off track, doesn't mean that you're now a demon. But I think there is a potential for you to become a demon if every time you come into an incarnation that the next level stimulates you to have, that you go against whatever the names are and the identity of the older member that's taking a human vehicle to speak the truth through. Then if you go against them over and over again, it's like having repeat opportunities to change that direction. And what happens is you subtly lose the perspective of who the next level is. And you could think of them as just another space alien group that has better technology. That's just one way of thinking about them. And but that kind of and I got this from not Doe in those exact words, but through a number of things that he said over the years. So Dr. Michael Mergen says, yea, from my understanding, that is limited. Thetans were basically souls of previous living things, and they attach to us and can cause us ailments and characteristics, and they train to release them. That's
And
right,
supposedly we have millions of them infesting us.
right. But some of them can actually be helpers.
Well, but
And
that's not like how the themes are.
well, yeah, I'm saying some of the discarnates can be helpers to us. So that it's not, uh, but they do, even if they're helpers to us, they still can bring to us actual physical conditions, diseases and so forth, that they had when they died. And I don't know how it exactly works together, but it depends how much they are interfacing with us. And it depends on our genetic history, because a lot of the discarnates have no genetic history on the same strain with a whole bunch of different people, right? They're on one strain or another. I don't know how many strains there are of human vehicles, but a lot of the ailments and characteristics that can go wrong in a human vehicle, diseases and things, come from that strain that we're attached to, that, from our ancestors. It's genetic. And but if we don't have experiences in the vehicle that we occupy now to counteract those things, then they may not actually get stimulated in us. And if we learn techniques of getting rid of the thoughts that are from beings that we don't believe uh, are good for us, then we are doing our own exorcism on those things. In a sense, we're getting rid of in the early Christians they had. Uh, I'm talking about like in the 1600s. They would have some of those early Christians that came over to the United States and were establishing colonies. They had all kinds of little things that they did to try to get rid of what they considered to be the demons. And like one of them was, I don't know if this is true actually. I saw it on a Twilight Zone, so maybe it's not. Yeah, you can't believe everything, right? But it was about the sin eaters, and that these people in this, like 1600s environment, were living in their communities, and when somebody would die, they would call upon these like homeless people or travelers.
Did we watch that together?
I don't think so. To come and they would prepare a banquet for that person
Yeah,
that
they
they
would
would
eat
put
the
all around
things.
the body while it was sitting in.
I
Uh,
think this is a real thing because
yeah,
I feel like I've researched.
and they were. And they did that, and then that person would come in there knowing that that was the case, because they would do it repeatedly, and that's the way they got fed a lot of times. And they would go in there and they would gorge on all the food, and it was all thrown away after that, I think, because that was representing the sins that that person had, so that they could go to heaven without those sins. I guess is the thinking.
Hmm.
And so there's all kinds of folklore associated with all kinds of things that I don't think there's any indication that that comes from the next level mind, but it's a distortion, I think, of that. Even though there might be some kind of way you could think about it in relationship to other scriptures. Maybe they relate it to the way that Jesus said that you have to eat my body and drink my blood, kind of thing, which blew their minds at the time when he said it. It might have been one of the things that I don't know. Doe didn't say this, but I guess it was instruction for him to do it. Otherwise, Doe would have probably recognized that as something that was a mistake for Jesus to say, because he did feel like Jesus made some mistakes, like when he announced that he was the return of the Messiah to the church in the beginning of his time talking publicly, um, and they threw him out of that temple for saying blasphemous things when he read from the book of Isaiah. And they took up stones to stone him for blasphemy. And so Doe felt like that was a mistake that Jesus made, even though his older member, T, in her spacecraft, uh, might have calmed it down so that he wasn't actually harmed by that. But he knew from that experience probably that I better be careful what I say to whom. So, so he was learning lessons at the same time because that's the way of the next level. They're always learning lessons. Oh, look at this. So Rise Above is talking about the sin eaters. He said sin eaters were individuals in medieval Europe, particularly in parts of England, Wales, and Scotland, who performed a folk ritual believed to absolve the dead of their sins. That's kind of what I said. The role of a sin eater was to consume a ritual meal, often bread, ale, or other simple foods, placed on or near the body of a deceased person, typically during a wake or funeral. Yeah, that's what I saw talked about. So anyway, good. I'm glad to get that update that it wasn't just a manufacturing of the Hollywood. Um, I didn't think it was because a lot of times, they get a lot of stories come from reality, although they build into them things. I think the guy that was eating the food, I think he was like wailing at the time because he wanted to make it sound like he was suffering by those sins
They did,
coming
you
into
know,
him.
it's kind of like the same as they probably did. Um, you don't have to. Like you can hire people to wail at your funeral too.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's right.
yeah, they will come and like, wail. I always thought that would be an interesting job.
It's that's where
I've
the
heard a couple recordings and it's pretty intense. I mean, like they go all out.
really.
They're getting paid to like lament your loved one's death.
Oh, I
I
forgot
think
about
it's like a
that.
Middle Eastern
I
thing.
think I do remember it
Yeah,
here, and that's what they were
it's
doing with
pretty
the.
intense.
You would see the Orthodox Jews the Wailing Wall would be wailing and whipping themselves with whatever that was. They got that from something. I don't know if it came directly from Moses or what. I mean, certain things can be used as tools for the current society by the next level that look absurd to us, but if people you know did them as an exercise, it could be used for them to have a physical way of thinking that they were getting rid of the lower thoughts, or or that their sins, they're missing the mark on this or that. I mean, the confession of Catholics, and maybe some other denominations have the confessional, I don't remember, but of telling somebody your sins, um, is kind of a benefit to keeping them inside. But I think, telling your sins to the person that you sinned against is a better thing to do. Yeah, if it's something that uh, would benefit them, I don't think you want to just load somebody up with all the things that might have been sinful in your mind. Just dump it on somebody. As if you're getting it off your chest. But what do you care about that other person? I think that can all be twisted. So doing it in that format, I guess, with a priest may be good, but the real way that I think that was meant to happen was by expressing it to, to God. But it's good to have a physical representation of, to sometimes in some circumstances to help us because our vehicles, our brains are, that's why they come with a physical body because then we have someone to actually talk to about these things. And throughout the classroom, we had the opportunity to write notes to Tiendo. And some of the class members were doing it a lot more than I was, I bet. Even though they didn't want us to just be talking and talking and talking about stuff. I mean, and there were times when sometimes they would come back from having traveled somewhere for, a week maybe, and they would come back and they would have all these notes because we didn't know where they were, so we couldn't send them to them, and they were too far away, things like that. And so they would come back and they would say, you know what, we can't we can't handle these notes. So if there was anything in the notes that you wrote that you want to bring up to us, then rewrite them and send them to us. And that also gave us the opportunity to learn the lesson of waiting 24 hours before we sent a note because they knew that we could easily have an impression or an idea to send a note when we really didn't need to. Because Tiendo didn't want to be barraged by things that we were taking care of on our own. And I think I went to an extreme to some degree of thinking that I was taking care of things on my own when I probably should have been talking about it. But not entirely. I did both. So anyway, so uh, well, I've already touched on a number of things in tape 272 and 273.
Are you caught up with the chat?
Yeah, I'm caught up in the chat. Um, but just a little bit more since I got my title there with Epstein and cloning operation, which is a question mark on purpose because I'm not claiming that that's absolutely true. Because
How are you supposed
but the way I think, right, but the way I think about it, for whatever it's worth, is that the humans aren't like working side by side with uh, many, if any, of those space alien souls. But I could be wrong about that. But they could be working side by side with individuals that were groomed by the space aliens so that that interface could happen more natural looking. Even though the space aliens, they can grow vehicles and they can put on clothing and they can uh, perhaps appear to be like any other human. Because they're hybridizing, and Doe talked about this. That because their vehicles didn't last that long, even though they lasted a lot longer than human vehicles last. But in whatever civilization they were in when they fell away from the next level's membership, um, uh, those vehicles that were, I believe, made for them by the next level, grown for them by the next level in laboratory, so that it's a physical vehicle. They don't live necessarily indefinitely, and especially when they go through a reverse metamorphosis into human behaviors and ways, whatever those are. When they do that, then their body, if it still has the program in it to even develop uh, an organ system to reproduce the way that humans do, then that could take place over a short amount of time. And T and Do talked about how that's what happened to Adam, that he went through a reverse metamorphosis. And you can listen to that in tapes 25, 26, and 27 talked about. Uh, and that it didn't take very long. It didn't, that reverse metamorphosis to where he was reproducing with Eve. In order to start that, to to actual to begin the current experiment with offering uh, a training ground for new members of the next level to experience, to where they would become trustworthy new members of the next level, to be on their spacecrafts and operating with them with all the same intention. And that's not a clone. And that's not also a robot, and not at all. In fact, humans are much more robotic than entirely than next level members, because humans don't know that we have all these discarnates influencing us, and all these thought forms influencing us, and all these other humans influencing us, and society influencing us. Members of the next level don't have any of that. They just have their minds and their older members' mind, and other individuals that love being there. I mean, it would be like joining a corporation to where you really love your work, and you don't have any reason to have any negative thoughts about it. But that doesn't mean you don't grow from your experiences in that corporation. Don't even refer to the next level as a corporation. And he also referred to the Luciferian fallen angel souls, just to use that ancient terminology, the space aliens, as a corporation. He used the word Lucifer because he didn't feel to lose that terminology, because there is accuracy in that terminology. It's not doesn't mean it's all accurate, but to the fact that that individual had a name that became the primary one that went against the next level, but that others that were also members of the next level sided with. And because of that, ended up being all limited to the Earth and the near space around it. However that, however far that near space goes.
Do you think the Van Allen belt has something to do with it?
Yeah, I don't know if the Van Allen belt has something to do with it. We looked it up today. What was the Van Allen belt? And two different sources said two different things about. One said that the outer region is at an altitude of 9,300 to 12,400 miles away from the Earth. And the other source that Kathy investigated said that there were two kind of belts, and one was
Well,
620.
no, not that there were two. There are two Van Allen. There are two components to it. It's two belts. It's composed of an outer ring and an inner ring.
Two belts
Yeah.
that were composed of an outer and inner ring. And the inner
Yeah.
ring was 620 to 378 miles above the Earth,
Right.
and the outer one was 8 to 40,000 miles above the Earth.
So not they're not too far apart from, like, the inner one like,
Yeah, maybe they were talking about the outer one. Or maybe, when they talk about the Van Allen belt, maybe they're not talking about the inner and the outer. Because I
well,
guess,
there are, yeah, yeah,
well, the
that
reason why
makes
they were
sense.
saying that humans can't go through the belt is because they would die from radiation poisoning.
Well, maybe we haven't gone through it.
Right. They were saying if humans haven't gone through it, it's because they were afraid that people were going to die by going through it. And I've heard other people say that their suits were made to account for that. So,
Because, yeah, the moon is definitely outside the Van Allen belt.
yeah, because the moon is what,
It was 235,000.
238, 855 miles
Yeah.
from the Earth.
Oh,
So,
it is
but according to this, if it
quite a
really
ways.
does go 440,000, right? So it's still not even halfway to the moon with this belt. So, and but it's also supposedly even the inner belt is beyond where the space stations are, right? And so I don't know if they're getting bombarded by much radiation. I mean, everybody is bombarded by radiation. That's a fact, right? Uh, the way that we classify everything. So, because the sun is putting radiation out, my understanding is that the solar wind is actually blocking the cosmic radiation from the places
Hmm.
away from the sun, further away from the sun that's happening. And it's not that all radiation is bad. I thought it was for a long time, but when T and O were talking about the nuclear power plant that was being built in Texas, but wasn't getting authorized because people were protesting against it because they weren't disposing of the waste in a safe way. T&O felt like they felt the next level was behind them not putting that online until they could dispose of the waste in the right way. So they weren't against nuclear power. And that was a wake up for me after I left the classroom to learn, even though I was probably there when they were talking about it. But a lot of things that they talked about went over my head or at the time. I just don't have a clear memory of until I sometimes hear the tapes. Your thoughts on the tridicyls found in Peru from Sunshine? Tridacyls. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah, neither Kathy and I understand what those are.
Sounds like it might be something that's newly discovered.
Yeah,
Tell us.
is it newly discovered or
Tell us.
we'll do a search on it, and or I will, or one of us will, and we'll, try to learn about it. I don't know if it's related to the lines of Nazca. How do you say that?
I honestly don't know, but I
Nazda,
know
Nazda, is it?
Nas,
I'm
Nazca.
sorry. I used to know how to say that correctly, but I don't say it much, so I forget the pronunciation. Nasdaq? No, no,
It's not
it's not
Nasdaq.
the
It's
Nasdaq.
N-A,
That's the stock market.
I think it's
But
Nazca or N-A.
Nazca, Nazca
I think
lines.
that's how it's.
Yeah, I don't know if it's related
It's
to that.
from
But I think that's in
God.
Peru. But of course, there's all kinds of things that were happening in Peru, which to me is evidence of a previous civilization. I would think, or a time when the space aliens were using that area as a base, whether they're humans living there as a tribe or not. Uh, we don't know. I mean, I don't know if the next level needs runways. From my understanding, is they don't need runways. They can land pretty much wherever they want to. Uh, uh, they don't. They're not. They don't have propulsion. They don't use
Well,
primitive
they don't know that
propulsion
those
systems.
are runways.
Right. They don't know that they are, but
I mean, I
it's one of the
I
thoughts. Of it.
always think. I mean, one of my theories is that it was just art. It's just art.
Right. It
And
could have
that
been just
that
art.
they wanted people from the sky to see it.
Right. They might have had a desire to appeal to people from the sky.
Or they knew that, they saw stuff flying around up there and they wanted to communicate with them, and so they put stuff down on the ground.
Yeah,
Like, hey,
I guess
here's a
that's
giant spider. Here's a figure
right.
of, here's what we think you look like.
Right.
That's just my thinking
No,
about it.
that could be totally reasonable to me to think that that's possible. That that's what they were doing. I mean, they don't have to have necessarily, uh, seen people with flying devices. But then again, they could have been flying devices there, and it could also be people that were uh, making those flying devices, using those areas for something. Or there could have been multiple developments in a civilization to where the next level was helping develop technologies for flying, and others weren't on that planet, at that time during that civilization. We don't know how the garden is grown by the next level, civilization to civilization, but we also don't know. Um, but we get clues, and some of the clues. Well, Doe knew that there was at least one civilization, but he felt like there were many before the current one on Earth, and that the Earth itself wasn't going to be recycled, just the life forms on it, uh, but mainly associating with the members that went against him repeatedly and lost their mind, the next level mind, and so they were um, no longer capable of changing because that happens. And that's in a sense the meaning of going backwards. So you're going to, if you are turning the eyes of somebody that could potentially become a member of the next level away from that direction, then you are potentially entertaining the influence of those minds that uh, don't think that's a possibility.
Our neighbors having guests.
Mm, that's nice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, well,
they must have maybe,
yeah, they probably are staying right around the corner, I'm guessing.
yeah. So,
We are nosy. Everybody stares at everybody in the campground. We don't know what else to
well, a
do.
little bit, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
We're
mean,
like, oh, somebody new is coming in.
right.
When people leave, we're like, yeah, good riddance. Even though we don't even.
Well, it depends on what they were doing.
Yeah, sometimes we are like good
If they
riddance.
have a bunch of kids that are screaming the whole time,
Or like
that's
this,
kind of
the last guy that was next to us was like, I'm gonna come outside at 2:30 and play my cell phone and have videos playing. It was like
right.
loud.
So we got to put on our noise machine.
Like you do realize half the campground can hear the videos you're watching. Every word.
So your thoughts. So Vivian Davis says petrodactyl.
Hysterical. Those are like birds, right?
Well, she spells it
I
Petrodacty.
can't. I don't know. My
YLF.
brain doesn't work like that. If you
Yeah.
want to write it down,
Then
look
Vivian says the dinosaur question mark. Oh, I guess that's a question mark. So they're talking among themselves or just sharing that in the chat. So that's so we'll just leave it at that for now. That we don't know what those are. Um.
it up.
So uh, let's see what else is there to talk about. Well, but I keep on getting around to that. It wouldn't be a surprise to me if well, I don't doubt for a minute that humans engage in all kinds of experimentation. And I talked about it in the beginning of the live stream as well, as many times in the past. And,
Where'd the chat go?
well, you see, it's on a different window.
Why don't you just keep it in that window?
I don't know why it goes away from that. Because I guess I click over here and I shouldn't click over there.
Sorry.
But, yeah, because I do want to see when people leave a comment. Um, so, so today it like became a little bit clearer in my mind. Yeah, Vivian says I think sunshine might have meant the dinosaur, laughing out loud, just trying to help. And sunshine says I think discovered within the last decade, small gray-looking creatures. Oh, that's interesting. Small gray-looking creatures. S- so I'll look them up and uh, and see if what they're talking about. I know I've seen people with videos of little, small little. They look like the gray aliens, but they like fit in your hand. That they say they were. I don't know what they're saying they are. Uh, but they have heads and eyes and nose and mouth and everything. But I think they were deceased. That they said they had them. So maybe the grays can actually reproduce and produce little tiny grays. I don't know. I mean, human babies can look pretty strange also. Anyway, moving on.
Yes, you should move on. Don't be talking smack about babies.
Yeah, I better not talk bad about babies.
Mm-mm.
I like babies fine. I mean, as long as they're somewhere else. Um,
I concur.
Not that I
We
raised the
done the
baby.
baby thing.
I
Yes, we've
raised the
already done the
baby, and
baby.
Kathy also raised her baby, and they're
Although my
now
baby would
adults.
say something different.
Yeah, well,
My
they,
baby would
they all have
say
their own ideas
I
about
was
things
not
when
around.
they're raised. I would hear my daughter say things about me that I thought, really, that's me, and I have to think about it. I guess if that was her perception, it was nothing
Right, that's the
negative.
thing. Yeah, it's like if that's their perception, then that's something that needs to be, um, you know,
Yeah,
come to grips with.
right. I mean, at times depends on what it is, right? But
Anyway,
you could spend a lot of time trying to make pieces of the puzzle fit when they don't really necessarily fit. So, uh, so let me go to the tape because I haven't really talked about that much.
there's a lot going on with it. Damn it, it's already 7:09.
Doe is talking about the phone call that he felt. Uh, you won't hear that in this tape to, directly, but you'll see it implied that he felt like T, while T was outside her vehicle, had um, stimulated something to do with Whitley Strieber. And if he, ends up hearing this, because I think he's still in his vehicle,
I don't think so.
it may be beneficial. I don't know,
I don't think so.
but I don't think he does. I don't think he follows the
I
likes of
don't think
me.
he's still alive.
Oh no. Oh, okay. But anyway, so uh,
I could be wrong about that.
so something about that experience, he feels Doe felt like, and this is 1987. He's talking about this. Doe is talking about this. Um, felt like that Whitley Strieber received a message of some sort from T to expect contact from somebody. And and so Doe, at whatever point he felt like that became clear to that, or he got reminded of that, directly or indirectly. I don't know if T talked about Strieber. I don't remember when he wrote the book, if T was still in her vehicle, the communion book that we had in the classroom, and the transformation one that came after it. Uh, I don't know if he remembers that T was interested in Strieber when T was in her vehicle, uh, but it didn't matter because Doe became aware of a communication with T after T left her vehicle that he was having, and he would spend time actually conversing with her in some ways, silently in his quarters. I don't know if he ever spoke out loud or not, but it wouldn't be terrible if he did, I don't think. But I know people can think this is crazy, but they think the whole subject is crazy. So that's part of the territory. But he felt like that when he instigated the call to Whitley Strieber, and he gave the task to Dan Sodi, and Dan Sodi would usually have a check partner, as far as I knew. And one time I was assigned to be the check partner, I think by Doe, and I don't remember how it came down exactly, but I just sat in because we had two phones on every line, so that we could have a check partner and anything we were talking about, and there was all kinds of things that we would be talking about at times with realtors or potential employers or our employer, or not that we spent time talking with those people, but sometimes we had to talk for them with them for legal reasons or for reasons of maintaining our job. And also when we were talking to T and Doe when they were not in the house where we were living, uh, T and Doe wanted us. We didn't talk with T and Doe together on the phone. And even if they were giving them, if Doe had something to say, I don't know that T ever got on the phone that I can remember, but with us. But I didn't see all the circumstances that were happening. But Doe was on the phone many times with us, and after T left, would even give little meetings that you'll see in those 260 numbers of tapes. You'll see one that talks about in the tape log a phone call. I think it does, maybe I don't know. But so anyway, so Doe had Dan Sodi call, and I was the check partner sitting in on the phone call. And I didn't say anything. I kept the receiver away from my mouth totally. And we didn't tell Whitley Strieber that there was someone else on the phone. It wasn't his business really. Anyway, but he gave Dan Sodi a few things to talk about, to bring up, and two things to not bring up. And ended up Dan Sodi brought up the two things that he was not supposed to bring up, and uh, didn't talk about the things that he was supposed to bring up in the way that Doe wanted him to. But Doe takes responsibility for that because he felt like it was uh, that he was using the word we, that it was not done in the right way. And he gives Dan Slody a lesson in this tape. And Dan Slody has a hard time coming to terms with it, but does. And because Dan Sodi, um, he's outside his vehicle now, but I believe there's a strong mind associated with that vehicle. And I don't doubt that he's in the next level's care if he wasn't even sent to come back, the soul we're talking about, to interface with humans now, to find a vehicle that he could take over to finish the task. And true, I don't know if that's happening, but Doe said that some would have to come back to have some more overcoming, even among the ones that left with him. So I don't know why that couldn't be an effect for the ones that didn't leave with him. I think it's a possibility. So, so at the time, he hadn't listened to the tape that Dan Sodi made of the conversation that he had with, because we had a way of recording the tapes because of when T and Doe would call or Doe would call and want to be, he would call some individuals and talk to them, and other individuals weren't there at the time, so we would record calls. And so Dan Sodi was recording the call for the sake of sharing with Doe what he talked about. And so Doe hadn't listened to the tape yet, but yet he found himself while he was having some kind of a talk with T, distracted, and he felt like he was mad at Whitley Strieber, and he felt like he was also uh, mad at Dan Sodi, and he didn't know why. But he felt like with Whitley Strieber, he was preoccupied. He was too preoccupied with his own significance and self-importance, and with Dan Sodi for not. He didn't know why yet for Dan Sodi, but then when he was at the meeting, he said right off the top, he said that he didn't think it was right for Dan Sodi to have an audience because the other students that were in that location while Dan Sodi was talking could hear at least what Dan Sodi was saying. I don't know if they listened to the tape because some of the students piped up during this meeting to say that they
Yourself
heard
included.
what Strieber had said, right?
Yourself included.
Myself included, in the tapes. But others didn't know at the time when Dan Sodi was talking to him because all they heard was what was happening that when Dan Sodi was talking. And yes, I was there at that time. And so
Oh,
you said there
um,
was psychic warfare going on. Go ahead. What is on your mind?
uh, uh, where's your phone at? Oh, it's over there.
I don't know. Oh,
Donna's.
there it is.
Our friends in Pennsylvania are watching.
Oh, really?
She says I just texted oops, that cute guy on YouTube my story about the white coats. Dang it, I'm entering his
That's so nice of you, Donna. To say, is Eric there too?
are cute. Okay, let's
That would be
see.
fun. I mean, and Abby, if
Well,
Abby's
let me
there, I don't
know
know.
if you want him to talk about it on the stream. I don't know.
Okay, well,
It's
I'll,
pretty intense, so.
yeah.
Mm. Oh, can I see your nail clippers?
Are they okay?
Yeah, it's just her story about guys in white coats.
Oh, okay.
I guess I didn't say that in the beginning.
No, I didn't hear that.
Sorry.
Well, I could read it on the air.
Well, I don't know if
Right. So
yeah.
let us know, Donna, and or Eric, if you want to share the story. I wish I could actually bring people in that, at least in an audio basis, so that individuals can talk to me sometimes or talk to us sometimes and share some experiences. Maybe we'll have to, think about how to do that. It wouldn't be just for everybody, I don't think. But I don't know if we have enough bandwidth to do that because we are limited bandwidth. But it certainly would be something to think about. I have thought about it in the past. I could put some effort into it. So I'll keep on talking while we wait to see if you're gonna, if you want us to relay that story, and then talk about it a little bit. I'd love to do that. Um, well, I was talking about how having the students listening to Dan Sodi talking to Whitley Strieber was stimulating a circumstance that's psychic warfare, that he called it. Uh, Basically, because the thoughts that the listeners are having affect our subconscious mind and can affect our subconscious mind. And 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 that subconscious mind, like, can affect Dan Sodi, and uh, Dan Sodi's subconscious mind can also affect what he says to the person on the phone. And I don't know if that subconscious mind then can go to that person on the phone also and affect them. And but that's the way it works with thoughts. And because thoughts aren't just thoughts, because there are also discarnates and even space alien souls that become the avenue of bringing those thoughts to other people, bringing those ideas to other people. And uh, and and a person is going to get thoughts that are not necessarily the accurate understanding of what that person said, because in the human kingdom, and the space aliens are part of the human kingdom as human equivalents because of their limited understanding about things, and even their limited biology that they now have to occupy, and the limited amount of next level mind that they still have. Because of that limitation, uh, they're prone to misunderstand things that other people are talking about, and so becomes a distortion and can influence somebody to be having trouble talking about something. And Doe and T demonstrated this in a number of meetings, to where um, they felt like uh, there was no thirst from us, and so uh, they would be stumbling. The reason that they knew that that was the case was because it wasn't easy for them to talk about the things they wanted to talk about. It was like, and they were hearing thoughts that they knew were not their thoughts, because any individual can can learn to recognize what their primary thoughts are. It doesn't mean that there can't be a discarnate hitchhiker that they picked up, when they went to the store and they had a conversation with somebody, and they had something in common, and the spirit that was hanging around that person decided, I'm going to hang around this other person because, to see if I can, have some experience with this other person, and then so they're in the car with you, and then that spirit can then leave that if they're not getting what they want from that person, that human, and then they can go back to the other person or to somebody else, because they've kind of got like a honing device. I think they're attracted to uh, well, things like the name that they had while they were living in the world, without a body. That's like an identification. It's like it's like a URL, or an email address. So, like, if you're thinking about somebody that's deceased, you're potentially sending them a little message, I think, is one way to look at it. But our thoughts aren't that powerful, and they don't last that long necessarily. So, where next level thoughts are more powerful and they last longer in the ether. And so I'm not saying that just by having a thought about somebody that we're like sending a message to that dead person for them. But then there's evidence of some of that happening with seances and stuff that not necessarily fake. I mean, it can be an illusion, but it can also have some truth to it, and it can also be a space alien playing games with the person, you know, and responding to anything that they ask for in some way to even make, yeah, the Ouija board, make objects move on the Ouija board. They have ways of stimulating that to happen, even though the person with their fingers on it may not think that they are actually instigating it. They might be subconsciously instigating it by the influence of thoughts on them to go in a certain direction, with answer being like a yes or a no or kind of thing. It's got to be pretty simple, but sometimes they direct people to letters, right, to form words and things. I never actually used one, and I don't know that I want to. I know T experimented with them, according to my understanding, before she met Doe. I don't think they ever picked one up after that. They certainly had the opportunity to do so if they felt like it was of value to the class, because T did share astrology understanding with us and bought us a bunch of books that we could use as a game, not to actually look at our own charts because they felt like, see, when T and Do would tell us not to do something, they didn't just say not to do something. Maybe sometimes they did, okay? I don't remember exactly, so I'm not going to say never. But a lot of times they would say why they want us not to do something, even though they might not say that during the same breath. But we would learn it later sometimes, depending on the things that we did, what they gave us to do. So they didn't tell us what not to do with the astrology at first, I don't think, but pretty close to that. T said the instruction is to not do our natal charts, which anybody doesn't know that terminology, that has the chart of the nativity is considered to be the birth chart of the time and place drawn up with the positions in the heavens of the planets and other potential objects or midpoints in that chart. And, with the constellations that were, uh, you know, with those planets were within those constellations, and all potentially having some degree of influence over us. And they said the reason why they didn't want us to do natal charts is probably a couple fold. But one was that we're not, by trying to leave the human kingdom behind, which was the whole premise right from 1975 that we were doing, to get on board of a spacecraft. And, that's like the bus, taking the bus to college. The spacecraft really isn't important. It's going to college, which is what's important. And so, was that we be leaving, that we know those influences from the heavens of the nativity and the other things that were happening with the moon, position of the moon and the aspects and all, didn't pertain to us, even though we still had in our genetic history characteristics that can relate to um, the things that our ancestors experienced over the years, and even in our current life of this human vehicle experienced, that uh, were to some degree influenced upon us by what was happening in the heavens. Because what's happening in the heavens can be also stimulating things that are happening with the discarnate world, with the thought forms, with the potency of those things, with the weather events, with the you know all the things that are happening on Earth can have relationships with other things that are happening throughout the bodies in uh, what we consider to be the solar system and beyond.
Um, Donna says, yes, you can talk about it. Yes, read it on air. I don't know if you can you read that writing?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, so Donna says, "Hey Steve," which is the name of my vehicle. Um, Stephen, actually, is the proper spelling, Donna. No, PH. Not that I care about that, but it's Donna. I had the nightmare as a child about men in white coats. They sliced me up on my parents' kitchen table and placed me on water in the backyard, about 6 to 12 inches under the surface grass.
Keep reading.
They removed the grass and dirt, peeled it up in one piece, and placed me on the water. I woke up before they put the soil back on. I tried to run out of the backyard before they cut me up, and there was a very high fence, which in reality there was no fence. I jumped on my parents' backs as they were messing with their lawn to get them to help me, and it was like I was invisible to them, as well as our neighbors. I asked for help. That's it. Scared the crap out of me. Still see it clearly after 60 years. Glad to hear you guys are doing well. Love and Mrs. Donna. Uh, then as a PS,
Yeah, if you need to read
I
that.
won't read the name.
Well, I don't know if you need to. I don't know what the piano is, but
Well,
it
no,
might
it's
be
it's
personal.
interesting. It's
But it
interesting.
might be, is it personal?
No,
Okay.
says don't ever know if I told you about an alien, a gray, in my bedroom after her daughter was born. I knew they wanted to take her. I jolted up and threw my arms over her and said, "No, you're not taking her," as her husband slept. Wow. No, I don't remember you telling me that story. Both those stories are like, wow.
I mean,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. And I think, I don't doubt that uh, those could have been real experiences happening in the psychic world. I mean, they could have had their physical reality around you that you didn't even know was happening, that you were translating into the physical realm that you were in at the time. And I mean, I could, try to guess on some of it, but I don't know. But but in terms of the thought of them, a little gray alien taking your daughter, um, I don't doubt that that's a potential, and it seems like to me that uh, you had the strength of mind that the next level might have helped you with in order to say no to that. Because I don't know, well, I don't know. I don't know how to determine who has that kind of strength of mind to, have that kind of a strength to say no to them. Because I think they can be a pretty subtle influence on us. Um, but, so, wow. So that's, hope you all are doing well as well. And good to hear. Good to hear. And maybe we'll talk about that later, off the air. But I wanted to finish a little bit with this psychic warfare before I close the stream because I do need to close it pretty soon. Because I started it a little late because we were busy listening to tapes and they were increasingly interesting. But Doe says about tape 272, which goes to this as well, to what I just read in terms of the power of the mind, and that your mind goes into that person's subconscious uh, uh, and other people's subconscious. And he says, that when people have a lot of influences, because everybody doesn't have the same amount of influences and the same strength of influences, and influences that are focused on the same kind of things. So, for example, Doe says that, like, he went someplace um, to meet with a realtor that was handling uh, the house that they were uh, seeking to rent, and that um, the person that was handling that, the real that was in a she vehicle. Uh, we're talking about a human vehicle, of course. Um, they were trying to avoid her seeing them um, when at the time when that person was showing the house, because it was supposed to be owned by Liv Odie and her theoretical husband, because we didn't have husbands. There was no relationships in the classroom except for fellow crew members and our lab instructor, older members, T and Do. And so, but Liv Odie was the name that they were using legally for the paperwork because they did that with me too. And they did that with Lagodi and some others to where my name was on the paperwork because they thought that there wasn't anybody looking for us that might be searching for my name in things in order to try to interfere with us and the classroom. Not that we did anything wrong. We didn't do anything to break any of the laws, morally or legally. So anyway, so um, so he was putting out the thought at the time that he had been in the mountains with Junodi, and that um, because he didn't want influences to cue that realtor into having thoughts that would question why there were three of us living in the house. Because I think they were saying that, uh, I think Liv Odie was saying that her and whoever was playing her husband, I don't know who it was exactly, because maybe that person was never on the scene. Liv Odie was doing it by herself, maybe. Because when I did it, I was portrayed as having married another class member, and that person was sometimes talking with the realtor. That happened on the Lost Angel craft that I was on that deed, I think. And Chakoti was my partner. And so when that person would come to the house on occasion, that happened a time or two, I think two times, we went out there to talk with the person. and I was winging it. I didn't know, but I just know what not to say. Um, but to just try to be normal, you know. Anyway, so Livodi was the one that was being used as the point person for this, because you have to understand that um, if anybody that was renting a house to us got wind that we were part of what was called by the national media in 1975-6, the UFO cult, that might not be a place that we would be allowed to stay in very long.
Well, and Doe was talking about the Mariner's craft, that story that he told.
Right?
You remember that? You recall it?
Yes. I didn't get to it yet in the notes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it was in this tape.
Yeah,
So I'll go down to it in a minute.
or it was in the last one.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Maybe. I feel like it was in the one that we listened to right before it.
Hmm. Okay. Maybe it was. I can search for Mariners. I don't know if I spelled it right.
But I mean, it's a quick story. It was
Yeah.
just about.
I don't remember it off the top of my head. I have to get my mind refreshed on it. But I think that was in California.
And
He was
he
talking
was
about the earthquakes.
right. And he didn't want the landlord to come over and be like, why are there
Oh, right.
30
I remember
people?
now.
Why is there evidence of 30 people living here?
Yeah, see, I had a misunderstanding to some degree about that, so I'm glad we heard that on the tape. Because when we left California the first time after we were there, which was after T left her vehicle, some years, or maybe not that long after, actually, now that I come to think of it, because I had a missing piece in my mind of the timeline there. Um, but we were there, we were in California, and I think we were in Orange County when there was that earthquake that collapsed some freeways on people. Um, and I remember sitting at what we called the dining room table. It wasn't really a dining room for us. It was where the comm center was, and uh, the chandelier that was above the table started going back and forth, and we were looking at it, and it was like, whoa, this is weird. And that we had that kind of a minor quake experience several times while we were there. And I thought at one point, though, talked to us about, and it probably was on his mind, both things, but talked about it to us about he wasn't afraid of the earthquake so much of uh, um, being trapped in a location because let's say it was a bad earthquake and they had broken gas mains and let's say water problems and let's say power problems, and let's say they wouldn't be able to get food for a while, or all kinds of problems. He didn't want to be limited like that. And he didn't want to be stuck there because there were so many people trying to escape the area, which we know happens in earthquakes and other kinds of events, natural disaster events. That for the most part, I believe are natural disasters as opposed to human stimulated, in my opinion. Anyway, but that may be changing for all I know. Anyway, so because Doe did say that the space aliens would be assisting in the recycling, even though I think he was talking mostly about the spading under of souls or spirits that had become rotten, and so we're no longer, like a spirit that becomes an influence on a human to kill people. That's a rotten spirit. So the next level doesn't have any use for those, and it's part of the planet, and it's part of the end times. But it's always a part of the planet, I guess, that those influences are there um, because the space aliens have kind of that vibration that humans are expendable. Because they have this overview that humans are lesser because from evolutionary positions, they are lesser. But that doesn't mean that they're worthless. That doesn't mean that they deserve to be annihilated uh, unless the next level decides that's appropriate and they can judge and they can save those spirits for a future opportunity. So nothing is actually lost except for the current vehicle. And they can put those spirits with other vehicles that are growing to where that their good influence can influence those humans. Because the lower influences are coming from the space aliens. The next level doesn't create any negativity. They give us opportunities that humans would see as negatives, but that's because humans, uh, if they do see things that are negatives that they relate to being from God or the true kingdom of God, the true kingdom in the heavens, the next level above human, that um, it means, you know, if they look at God as having been evil for taking something away from them, then it's because they don't know any better yet. Like Jesus said, forgive them for they know not what they do when they were leading him to be strung up on the stick, on the execution device or method. But so um, uh, um, I can say cross, I guess, because I believe that Jesus did refer to it as a. But I don't know if the definition actually was the shape of the cross that you see in Christians, because there's a whole bunch of shapes to crosses. But in general, they're all the same kind of, one against the other, opposite the other. Because I know I was making crosses. I was part of a task that we were given. Some of the members were given. Parkody was the primary, because he was an incrafter and he was making the crosses all the time. And we were making them to sell them so that we could have an income without an out-of-craft task. And I don't know how many were sold, but they gave the task to me and Sorority as well, and maybe somebody else, maybe Glen Odie, maybe another person. I don't know if there was another one added to it, but we were all making crosses with all our spare time. I made a couple. We had made them out of like really nice wood, from the rainforest. A lot of times, rare woods that had really nice grains and everything, and sanded them down and put like gemstones embedded in them sometimes. Anyway, so I got way off the track there, but um, because influences can read our thoughts and even lack of strength to get us to do what they want us to do. And that's the way it is in the human kingdom in general. That influences are trying to timeshare with our vehicles to get us to do the things that they want to do. I mean, if they died with an addiction to a substance, then they're going to want to continue to influence somebody. Maybe not. Maybe they would want to influence somebody not to use that substance, I imagine. But if they hadn't overcome it enough, then they probably would want to influence somebody to use that substance because they wouldn't have the overcoming program developed. So, uh, so Doe was trying to put out the thought to the realtor that uh, that Livody was actually the one living in the house, and that uh, Junodi and her husband, I guess, I mean Livody's husband, I think might have been the idea of it, were coming to meet her for something she was to do. So in other words, they weren't there then because then uh, it's like that movie in Star Wars where the individuals that didn't want to be caught by the lower forces were saying to the lower forces at the checkpoint, "We're not the droids you're looking for," when they were actually were the droids that were being looked for. So, but if the minds weren't as strong as their minds, which one of them was, I think, Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? And he was a stronger mind, I think, as the others. And so if the ones those stormtroopers weren't of a strong mind, then that was that was good enough for them to not. I think it's kind of an example. So we even we joked about that in the classroom as having some relevance. You want to try to keep influences that would be against you for no justified reason, because we weren't going to mistreat the house. We weren't going to. In fact, we were going to treat it better than a lot of people would treat it, because we were going to even improve things. I don't know if every house we left was improved, but many of them were. I remember I saw skylights built into the house that we didn't even stay in for very long, for very many months, because Doe wanted more light to come into the house on the top floor. Um, and it became a task, and Alex Odie was on that task. I wasn't involved in it. He was an in-crafter at the time. But so I know that these things are true that I'm talking about in terms of improving the craft to be better than it was when we found it. And we would do the gardening and plant things and all kinds of things because we didn't want any reports. It was partially, we didn't want any reports from the neighbors or anybody else that things weren't being taken care of. Um, but also because Doe had a function for certain things. Um, in the classroom. I don't remember what the function was for flowers, except we had them inside the craft at times. Jim Odie was on the task of that. And it was funny that in this tape, we're talking about Jim Odie wanting a out of craft task and a job in the world. And that I don't remember how it happened, but I think Doe brought up that if any of you who haven't had a task like that were interested, you could put your feelers out. And Jim Odie put his feelers out to a florist, and he was feeling guilty that he didn't really want to have a job in the world, you know, but he felt like you know maybe
Sounds
he
like he
should.
wanted to have one
Oh,
because he
at
wanted
first,
because he wanted the experiences. He
right,
felt like
right.
maybe he wasn't. But did all Odie have
Oh,
jobs?
I don't think Already did, but he might have at one point.
Well, because Doe had said that he was the only one that hadn't had an out of craft task, but I didn't know if that meant that he just hadn't gotten one at that in
Yeah,
that particular town
I
yet,
think
and
so.
everybody else had already gotten
Right, I think it was because some weren't getting tasks, and he was taking that as a indication of whether we should stay in that area. Because if we couldn't support ourselves, he felt like T wouldn't have sent us to an area that we couldn't support ourselves. So, or that some of the individuals that did have out of craft tasks were maybe supposed to come in craft to do this task that was sharing the information again with the public. And so he wondered if others would maybe take their place and get jobs in the world. Atacraft tasks. So this is all part of his thinking because he's going through all these things in great detail. That's why these tapes are so valuable. It shows how thoughtful Doe was about everything and how he thought and why he thought certain thoughts and the strength of thoughts that he had and he was 100% consistent with everything that they were teaching from when they awoke in 1972, 3, and 4, and 5. And that was the period of time of their awakening. I guess it was probably like a 3.5 year period, if you want to try to be prophetically correct with that, because it talks about that in Revelation 12. But um,
Oh no,
because
it's 8 o'clock.
he knows what can happen in the invisible. All right, well, maybe I said enough about that
What's going
because
on with the chat?
there's a lot to it. Okay, there's a lot in the chat. Well, not that much. Well, Sunshine is saying the Nazca lines are a map of what's under the surface, the subterranean. Oh, is that right? Okay. Well, underground bases is part of what we know has been happening on this planet. We don't know how many times the civilization has grown to technically have the ability to build underground. And I mean, we know from what's his name's undercover covering up of things that were, in the Middle East, where they had a number of stories of living quarters.
Oh, Darian Q.
Darien Q.
I think that's how you. But the Nazca lines are like, like shapes. Like one's a giant spider, and
Not the lines, I think. That's something else.
no, those are part
Oh,
of the
that's part of
Nazca
that.
line.
I've seen the spider, and I've seen some of the other
Yeah,
depictions.
there's several
Yeah, there's a number of things.
there.
I don't know if they're all. Uh, I mean, if you've studied it, Sunshine, then uh, you you might know more than I or we do on the subject. But um, so I won't go there to any further on that. But but Sunshine says, in theory, I'll try to find that group that came to that conclusion. Okay, that's fine. Because maybe that might be a conclusion that somebody had about what those lines were, right? And there could have been other people with different conclusions or the same ones in a different facet of it. I know things work that way a lot of times. Uh, Actor Michael Merchant says you could use Discord. Yeah, right. I could use Discord. That's good to think about. Thank you for that, Michael Merchant. Appreciate that. So Vinny Dutra says, "Hi Sawyer, hi Kathy.
Hello.
Sawyer, I'm sure you heard Ozzy Osbourne died. I was just curious if you liked rock music or heavy metal before you started classroom lessons with T and Do. And yes, we did hear that Ozzy Osbourne died. And before I joined with T and Do, I was kind of a deadhead. But I went to a lot of concerts because I lived very close to New York City, like about 20 miles away, 30 miles away from the city center. And so I went to a lot of concerts and saw the Dead like 6 times uh, during my teenage years before I moved to the West Coast. And I saw them in Portland, actually, in 1970 something, as well as other bands. I went to Fillmore East, Fillmore West, so that's a little bit of it. Do you believe in this Heaven's Gate stuff? Says Will Pearson. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's what this whole site is supposed to be about. Everything that T and O, the leaders of what's called the Heaven's Gate information, were teaching. So Will says, been reviewing it recently. Also, why are you still here? Because I
So
wasn't ready to go,
I
I
think it's
guess.
funny when, I mean, just like think about that question and how incredibly sensitive that is. You just asked him why he didn't kill himself. Like, if somebody asked you that question,
Yeah,
how would you respond?
it
That's not,
probably it probably
uh,
didn't mean it that way,
I
but
know, but just like think about it. Like, Sawyer is a real person. He's not just a random, face on a computer screen. He's a real being, and asking questions like that are insensitive and rude. Why aren't you dead?
but you just don't know that, I guess. So okay, well, I'll just give you an answer to the question, and that is because I had more lessons to learn, and I chose not to go with them. I didn't even know that. I did know that they were planning to leave that way. I was there long enough for that, but you can read the story that I wrote because I don't mind talking about it, but it's not a simple story because we learn after things happen a lot of the things that we weren't aware of at the time that was happening to us. And so I'm going to say if you want to read it, then go to Sawyer's Story on my blog. It's called Sawyer HG, like Heaven's Gate, Sawyer HG at WordPress, no, SawyerHG.wordpress.com. And if you search for that title, Sawyer Story, you'll see there's actually two documents linked together on that story that are both worth reading, and it's long. It's the beginning of what I was writing, like an autobiography, but it goes through some detail of my leaving and my starting. So there's that. So Vinny Dutra says, Sawyer, I think Jesus probably was impaled on a stake or torture stake, according to Koine Greek. Right, that's why I called it a stick at first. Because I know there's some controversy on whether it was actually the shape of a cross. But whatever it was, uh, I don't know that it was impaled. I don't doubt that there were he was nailed to it. I don't doubt that because there was also talk that the others were strung up on it by ropes, like the ones that were talked about as the two thieves, which was also a common way of getting rid of people. And I don't know why they gave him that special treatment, but I think I know why. Is maybe it was part of prophecy, and so I can explain, how prophecy works, but it would take me too long to try to do it justice. But it works in part, just in general. I'm gonna say a little bit about it. That the next level knows that humans are going to do things a certain way at the time because they know the minds of humans and they know the minds of the space alien fallen angel souls, and so they can pretty much uh, say what is going to happen. Uh, and there's a lot of evidence of that in terms of how many things were said in the book of Revelation that have taken place and directly, like with the two witnesses. and everything in those chapters that I've written a lot about, and I made some videos about if you want to see what I'm all talking about on those. And Revelation 12 with the woman and the man, uh, that where the woman doesn't, she loses her life before the man does, just like T left in the bottom of that chapter. And then they carry on with the teachings after she leaves, which seems to be talking about, well, I believe it is talking about T and Do, T being the father and Do being the son in the ancient terminology. So, and also Revelation 14, the song is related to T and Do's lesson plan that they were representing through their minds, teaching to the students on the requirements to becoming a member of the next level. And also in Revelation 6 with the white horse, being the older member that conquers the human kingdom and goes about conquering because other people are conquering through that older member's conquering. And I know Christians have all their views about all these things I'm talking about, and if they're only glued to those things, then they're missing what those things can also mean. Not saying that there can't be meanings that the Christians come up with to those things in the way that they talk about them. But I've seen through a lot of study that uh, the lower forces have ways of blocking their minds from actually seeing that that return that was promised has already happened. The teaching time has already happened. And the only return that they're now looking forward to that they don't know is not the teaching time, some of them, is the time when basically the sorting happens to where it's the end of the cycle and there's no more options to change much. I mean, maybe there's still options if Doe plans to come in an armada that is actually showing themselves to humans that can see it in a way that's different than the way Heaven's Gate was seen by the world, but still was an option to see differently, because people can claim to things can happen to where not everybody can actually visually see it. And if they do visually see the same thing, they interpret it differently. And there's evidence of that throughout Scripture, of happening, with in the Moses experience and other places. So if Doe does come back to where everybody can see something, um, uh, it still will be a choice on what to see it as. And it can see it. Some people will see it as space aliens. Some people will see it potentially as a trick or holograms. And the space aliens can make holograms like they did with Our Lady of Fatima, according to Tiendo. And so you can see humans trying to duplicate that technology if they have it by drones, to where they're making images in the sky appear through use of lights through drones. And they do that with drone shows now, and they're getting more and more sophisticated with that. So, we don't know all the ways that things can be presented to people in a way that they could believe is happening. Because the Christian rapture has already happened and no physical vehicles were taken. Because that was referring to people leaving their lives behind, which happened in 1975 and 1994. Two, two types of raptures that were happening. And so all of that can be symbolically talked about, but it also can be talked about in terms of real events that happened over the years. And that's what my book, OBS just disconnected.
Well, maybe
It's
that's a.
reconnected. I'm just going to say goodbye, good night. It's reconnected successfully. So OBS just disconnected and reconnected, and we're going to take that as a good reason to end the stream. So good night, folks. It's been a pleasure. Glad to have you, Donna. and your partner and anyone else in your family that might be listening to this. Good night.